everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Universe Within podcast. This episode of the show is being sponsored by my friends over at a company called Real Mushrooms, realmushrooms.com. Sky Chilton and his father, Jeff Chilton. I interviewed Jeff a number of episodes ago. Really interesting guys. I really enjoyed that conversation with Jeff. And it's a company that sells and distributes medicinal mushrooms in powder or capsule form. I was really happy to have these guys come on. I think they were very much in alignment with the values of the podcast. As you all know, a big part of this podcast is about plant medicine, holistic medicine, and I think the benefits of medicinal mushrooms are truly fantastic, and I think there's really a growing body of work that's really showing and alluding to all of the amazing properties that mushrooms have. They sell a lot of different mushrooms, things you've probably heard of, like reishi, chaga, lion's mane, turkey tail, cordyceps. Those are all mushrooms I work with. They're part of what I consider for myself a really holistic supplement regime. And the thing I really love about their company, not only are they really good guys, I think they're really ethical guys, but the product is really amazing. It's all 100% mushrooms. They're organic, and that's really rare. For better or for worse, the supplement industry is highly unregulated, and so often when you get supplements, you don't necessarily know what you're getting. You may be getting some mushroom, you may be getting a bunch of fillers and other things. Oftentimes, even when you're buying what may be a mushroom, it may not have any of that mushroom in it at all, unfortunately. Even some of the big, I think even the biggest company that sells mushrooms, actually it's not the fruiting body, not the mushroom itself. It's the mycelial, which is grown on grain, and then those things are mixed up and then sold in a supplement form. So not only are you not getting the mushroom itself, you're getting the mycelium mixed with grain. So it's one of the amazing things of Real Mushrooms is it's exactly that. It's real mushrooms. So it's 100% mushrooms, organic. So you're getting a really good product. You're getting the actual fruiting body, the mushroom itself, 100% of that. And again, just really great guys. I'm really happy to have them on and supporting this podcast. So if you'd like a really good product, you'd like to start working with medicinal mushrooms, check out their site, realmushrooms.com. And also listeners of this show, if you go to their site, realmushrooms.com/universe, you get 25% off your first order, which is a really good deal. And I think once you start working and tasting their products, you'll really see and feel a big difference. So thank you to them. And I think that's it. And without further ado, here is the intro to the show. Hey everybody. On this episode of the show, I sat down with my friend Janeth Jaramillo. Janeth and I met many years ago, I think over a decade ago, when we were working together at the Ayahuasca Center, the Temple of the Way of Light. Janeth became a very dear friend. She, at the time, was heading the permaculture program there, working with planting, sustainable forestry, agriculture, a lot of really interesting things. And that also really started her on her journey of working with plants and medicinal plants, things like ayahuasca, Wachuma. So we sat down and had a really interesting conversation. It was a long time coming. Different reasons we didn't meet up, but she was someone I wanted to have on the podcast for a long time, so it was really a pleasure to sit down and connect with her. We talked about things like permaculture, her background, ayahuasca, her work with Wachuma or San Pedro, and a big part of this podcast was kind of the intersection between her Buddhist practices and these plant medicine practices. So it was a really interesting conversation. I hope you all get a lot from it, and I think that's it. Also, if you're interested in working with plants and going deeper into plant medicine, working in dieta, hopefully when this is released, there will Actually, this will be released right before our Portugal retreat, which we still have a couple spaces left. So if you're interested in that, you can check out my website at nicotianarustica.org. I'll be there with my colleague, Marav Artsy. It's a really beautiful opportunity to go deeper into the world of plant medicine. You can find more information on my website and also Marav's website. I'll put the links to both of those in the show notes. And then, as always, if you're able to support this podcast, that's a really big help to me. Patreon is a really good option. It's a subscription service. You can sign up for as little as $1 a month. It's a website, patreon.com. I'll put a link in the show notes. And that's a really beautiful way, if you feel like you're gaining something from this podcast, to give back. There's different tiers you can sign up for. Those tiers give you different things back, things like early access to shows, bonus material, Q&As. To all the people supporting that way, as always, thank you very much for your help. I really appreciate it, and it's really what allows me to continue making these episodes. If you're not able to do that, always doing some of the really small things to help with the algorithm. So if you're viewing this on YouTube or Rumble, hitting the subscribe button, turning on the notification bell, liking the video, leaving any questions or comments in the comment section. And then with the audio versions, Apple Podcasts and Spotify are the big ones, and leaving a starred rating and a short review. So I think that's it. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Janeth.
Running out from the maze, running out of the maze today. Running out from the maze, running out from the maze, running out from the maze today. I'm running out from the maze, running out from the maze, run out of the maze today.
So yeah, I met you, it seems like almost another lifetime now. It was, I don't know, maybe 12 years ago now. I think 2013 at the Temple of the Way of Light.
Yeah, 2013, when we were living in the jungle. I could remember exactly the houses, the heat, your classes, your meditation classes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was totally another lifetime. Are we recording?
Yeah, we're recording. So maybe to start, just if you can give a bit about your background, because you have an interesting background and kind of where you're from, what brought you here to Peru, what brought you to the jungle, what got you interested in working with plants, with medicinal plants, with ayahuasca, Wachuma, Buddhism. Just, I know it's always a big question, but maybe just to familiarize the audience a little bit with your background.
Okay, so I'm from Ecuador, and I was raised in Ecuador until I was 24. And when I was at that age, I didn't fit. It was like too many rules, a lot of different ways of treating female by that time, and I was wild, so I always had these big problems with my dad and my mom. It was crazy. So at some point, I was studying business. I studied business for many years, but my soul wasn't there, and I was told I have to do this, and that is what is going to be a good thing for my life, like a businesswoman, successful in this life. This is what would bring you happiness. But I wasn't happy. And I was studying in the kind of like the best university in Ecuador and one of the best in Latin America, as in this like business program. And I would cry. I would like, no, it was not my soul. And at some point, like because there was this cut between what I really wanted and what I was doing and what I was told that was good for me, I started having a lot of troubles, because I was at the same time I was like literally a punk in the streets and a business person at one time, and at the same time at nights I will be like hanging out with all these punk people, and it was just very schism. And I started doing a lot of alcohol. I was mistreating myself, and it got to a point that it wasn't good. So I decided to leave. And for some reason, karma was always bringing me to New York. I was in New York several times before, and I had friends. And I talked to one of my dear friends, and he told me, just come to New York. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And he told me, just come to New York. And I left when I was 24 with $200. And I went to my friend's place, and since then it was like a life in which I was taking care of myself. I was the only person, the only woman of my whole family, big family, extended family, that ever left as a woman. I was the only person that at that age wasn't married and following the path. I was just completely different. So I went to New York and ended up doing business because that was my training. So I ended up for like many years doing marketing and business, and it was great at the beginning because I got money, I got friends, I was young, I was partying, I was taking care of my life. And at the same time, I was very interested in meditation, but very interested in yoga, very interested in cultivating the body and the mind, which is something that in Ecuador, we didn't really have availability of these techniques, these teachings. And after a few years of being in New York, and the first year was really hard, the third, fourth year really cool, there was this void that I was feeling. I started like growing and growing, the same void that I was feeling when I was in Ecuador, to the point that I quit my job, which was so hard to do because I had a really good job. They loved me, really well paid, interesting. And it was a time where the whole world, this US, was in a recession. So I was the only of my friends that had a stable job. So it took me a lot of time to again say, like, this is not where it goes.
So this was like 2008, something like that?
2000, I left 2010.
Okay.
When everything was collapsing, I was doing really good. And I left because there was this big calling telling me this is not the life I want to follow. And because I was in New York, it's like full-on buildings, New York, this lack of nature, this lack of connection to nature started arising in my consciousness. One of the very vivid dreams that I had at the time that was like, wake up call. It was like me walking in the streets of New York, like, big streets, New York. I used to work in Fifth Avenue and 42nd Street, so giant buildings. And I was walking in these giant buildings, and all of a sudden I made a turn, and I found myself in a dirt road, just like this. And I was like, wow, I'm in this dirt road, and there is mountains just like this, and there's chickens running around. And this longing for being in more of a rural environment and more of like nature started really arising. So at the same time that I was in the business the last year, I started taking classes on, I was like crazy about the plants, taking classes. I work in a volunteer in botanical gardens, and I was taking all these botanic classes and soil management, and I took permaculture class, and I have this perfect career. It was going to end my business life. I was studying environmental science the last year of my stay in New York, and I was going to do this permaculture internship in Peru for 4 months. Then I was going to come back to New York, finish the environmental program, and I had it also planned, finish my work, and this is going to be doing this, everything is going to be so planned. And I thought I had it really well planned when I left my business time. And I came to Peru just for 4 months. Actually, I came to Peru to do an internship in permaculture. And the thing is that it was so well planned. Times, I'm really good at planning things. So everything was so well planned. As soon as I arrived to Peru, the bus, the taxi that was going to pick me up to take me to the hotel never arrives. So I didn't know where I was. I had to find another hotel. And since that, the minute I arrived to Peru, supposedly staying for 4 months, everything just changed. And this life started flowing. And because I just completely open to the flow of life, many things that seems like a miracle, like the flow start calling me. And one of them is I was coming to Peru to do this internship in permaculture, and the place back then was called Planet People Passion, but it was these two organizations, Paititi, which is an organization that work with plant medicine with Roman here in Peru, and this Planet People Passion organization with Cynthia, with is Roman's partners, people that work with ayahuasca here. So I met Cynthia in New York. I was the volunteer, the first volunteer they had for permaculture ever when they were in Iquitos, in the jungle of Iquitos, and I didn't realize, or I didn't put my mass attention that this project was like half ayahuasca retreats and plant medicine and half permaculture. I didn't really care as much actually about the plant medicine part. I was like, I'm gonna put my hands in the dirt. I want to plant the plants. And when I came to Iquitos, they were doing the last of filming this documentary called Sacred Science, and most of the crew have left, but there were still a few patients, like full on people with a lot of difficult medical conditions, cancer, Crohn disease, and there was a few people helping and supporting the patients, but not as many people. So as soon I arrived, I think like for the first month, there was no permaculture for me. They just put me literally straight to do 3 ayahuasca ceremonies. I was like, what is this? And after that, to help people that were the patients, and to support them, to feed them, to help them wash and clean. And that experience was very important in my life. I think the ceremonies itself were not as impactful for me, but what was impactful was the people, and seeing how the people were healing, how the people were connecting to different parts of themselves. They were accepting they were sick, they were accepting death, because I was there for over 2 months, and talking regularly with all these friends. They became friends, and talking about their lives, talking about what it meant for them to be in the jungle drinking medicine, completely different environment. For me, the jungle was more familiar because in Ecuador we have jungle, and I always liked the idea of living in the jungle, actually. That's why I went to Peru. And it taught me about people's resilience, and it told me also that this medicine, there is something there. There is something in this medicine. There is something in these traditions. There is something that I had no clue. And from that point on, life just started like happening. Somehow, I fell in love. I met a partner, and we were gonna go to Europe, but and then to New York, and then somehow I got a hire to support in the permaculture program of the Temple of the Way of Light. And it was like this. I didn't even ask. A person knew a person they needed, and I ended up living at the Temple of the Way of Life for 3 years, on and off, mostly working a lot with the permaculture program at the beginning when you weren't there, helping establish that program, supporting the young people, mostly young people, that would come to do this kind of like half internship with the permaculture, half ayahuasca retreat. So they will come for 2 weeks and drink, and then after 2 weeks they will work in the permaculture plants. And that experience just really changed my life, understanding more about plant medicine, and also learning about environmental practices, and learning about a world that I didn't even imagine existed, because the way I was raised, my dad is a doctor, my mom is a teacher, nobody ever goes out of the path of this is what you do, you go to university, you get married, this is how you live. And when I was exposed to other people's lives and many different stories of how to live a life more freely, I was totally in. Well, this is like half, I'm sorry, it's like a long story.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
When you were at Paititi, and just a side note is also I interviewed Roman on this podcast, so if people are interested in that, they can listen to him. He's a really amazing guy. Was that your first time working with kind of like a stronger or you know, however you want to call these, like a master plant like ayahuasca? Was that the first time you had experienced something like that?
Yeah, first time. Yeah, I wasn't drawn to cannabis. There was a lot of alcohol in Ecuador, but never, I haven't experienced something different. However, actually, I had mushrooms once or twice, and that was incredible. And I knew about, that's so funny, now I remember, like, wow, no, actually, I knew about Wachuma, San Pedro, because Ecuador is one of the places where San Pedro is, and we knew this plant is special. It's actually grown outside the houses in many places in the city, just to protect the house. And I also knew about Toe, never touched it. I did touch it, though. No good idea.
I imagine that must have been interesting too, because kind of as you were describing the patients and the work they were doing that was documented in that film, Sacred Science, I imagine it must have been interesting, because I think often when we think of healing, we think more on the physical level, like is someone being healed, meaning are their symptoms going away? But also, as you're describing that, there was something in the way that you were saying it that maybe the people were also experiencing physical healing, but that there was something else that was going on. Like you said, they were having to confront that they actually and accept that they were sick, and what that means, and coming to terms with their life, with death. Did that begin to shift your perspective in some way as to what these plants were doing, or ways in which they were working that were maybe not purely on the physical level?
Absolutely. I could see that at a physical level, some people were getting healed, but other people it was supporting, but the disease was so advanced that, could have been really hard if one of them died. The woman with cancer, Melinda, and I used to talk with her, and what I would hear from her is that the opportunity of connecting to spirit, the opportunity to know that there is a beyond this reality, and to connect to their wounds from the past, to connect to their relationships from the past and heal those relationships. That was even more important than the healing of the body, because that allowed her to be in peace with life. And when you're in peace with life, you also can be in peace with the process of death. There is no separation. And there was this, I hope I can remember the name. There was a little book that I read before my first ceremony at Paititi. I don't remember the name, but the whole theme in the book is that the people that were around you, your parents, your friends, they did the best they could with the information they had. And because the information that I read in the book, just tiny little book, and then the ceremony, and then talking about their healing with people, I realized that it was way beyond physical healing. It was the healing of different aspects of our being, the emotions that have been trapped, the emotions that were not allowed to be felt, the mental healing, the energetic healing. And for some reason, even though that was new for me, there was something in me that wasn't fully surprised of it. That was like, oh, because there is integrity. We are not separate. There is a manifestation of sickness in the body that comes from traumas, that comes from what happened to us in our lifetime, or to our parents, or to our ancestors, or to our society. So I had that notion already, but I think like seeing it from people kind of confirm. And I remember Melinda, she caused a big impression on me. She was so happy. She said, if I die, I will die happy, because look at me, I get to be in the jungle. And at that time, that disconnection between us humans and nature, that was so present for me, because that was my reality in New York. Actually, I wasn't even tapping into my own past and healing all trauma wounds. It was this disconnection between the natural world and us as being part and belonging to this world that felt very present to me at that time. So when she was like in the middle of nowhere, in this hut, super happy, being in peace, because she got to live in the jungle, looking at the stars. Yeah, there's something that was so impactful for me. I think that was the beginning of my healing, but it came through this door of disconnection to nature.
So you were really interested in, as you said, getting your hands in the soil, getting them dirty, planting plants. Can you speak a bit about permaculture? I think a lot of people are maybe familiar with that word, but I would imagine a lot of people aren't too. And maybe just what is permaculture, the ideas behind it, what it's trying to do.
Yeah. So it just feels like a lifetime ago. Like permaculture in my life is like not as present as it used to be, but at some point it was very important. And it's this system of thinking, of seeing the world instead of as a compartmentalized. It's like a holistic living organism, where and this is how indigenous people think. And they taught for many years. And the system of as permaculture was established by an Australian man named Bill Morrison, but based on indigenous practices, based on this very earthy understanding of how life works. So the idea is that we think in terms of systems, not like isolated unit, that the soil is this, and this is my plot of land, and this is separated by the wall, and that's it. No, we think about that everything is energy flowing and moving, and the sun coming from this part illuminate this side of the land, and the wind has this flow that we can observe and see how we can use this energy, how the water is flowing. So it's like a very beautiful way of connecting to earth and connecting to all the elements, and creating a space that could be used by humans. We created because we want to live in it. That connects, that it has no separations between the elements and what we want to achieve. We collect the rain, we make houses with the same mud in the house, in the dirt. There is different zone systems. Like the first zone that is close to the house is like where you get your veggies and your herbs, the ones that are closer. And it's just really beautiful way of living consciously and living in accordance to the environment, not block. And we can see it here in Peru. Like my house is made out of the same mud bricks from the land and the same eucalyptus from the land and the rocks we use. My husband is super into planting, and making big rock walls, so he makes all these rock walls everywhere. So there is that connection to nature and living in nature, not separate.
Mm-hmm. So you were at Paititi, and then you accepted this job at the Temple of the Way of Light, leading the permaculture program. What was that like? What was that like being in a new environment? I mean, maybe still somewhat familiar, but also a new environment. You're living in the Peruvian Amazon, and as you said, it was at the Temple of the Way of Light, which, if people aren't familiar, is a big plant medicine ayahuasca center, really specializing in ayahuasca, also in the lineage of a group of people called the Shipibo people. So what was that like? Because your job is working in this like integrated system of permaculture of the land, being connected to the jungle, also kind of facilitating all of these people coming from the outside, usually people coming from other countries, from other cultures, into this different environment, learning to work with their hands, learning to work with plants, and at the same time, as you said, that was half of it. And then the other half is they're also going into these quite deep internal processes of drinking ayahuasca, of working in this lineage of the Shipibo, and I would imagine like that brings up a lot. I mean, it's really also shifting your worldview, like, because these things are also very connected. Like as you said, we often compartmentalize things. Like we look at ayahuasca as not a plant, even though we know it's a plant. We don't necessarily like realize it comes from a place, it comes from a soil, it comes from a location, it comes from a culture. I mean, I do a lot of work with tobacco, and I would say the vast majority of people, when they think about tobacco, they don't think of a green plant with pink flowers. They think of something else. So there's also kind of a disconnect in these things.
Yeah, wow. I'm going to have a little bit of drink. Give me 1 second. You just remind me to one of the first things that happened when I was the first week that I was at the temple. There was a group of volunteers. I was the first. They didn't have a boss before. There was nobody in the permaculture program, so they were raking leaves for days at a time. So I came there, and I was the boss. And I asked one of the persons to water the plants. So we plant these plants, and I was like, okay, you are closer, you're there. I have to take care of this other group of volunteers, because it was like 2 months. For 2 weeks, this group of volunteers will be drinking, and this other group will be working in permaculture. Then the other, it will change. Yummy. Let me put it here.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked this person to just water the plants that they planted, and it was some beautiful herb or something. And the person didn't want to do it because it was not in his or her turn of working. And I was like, wow, how can you drink this medicine and be doing this and also having these other plants and not taking care of them? And that struck me, and I just remember this now. It was a beautiful program. Perhaps it wasn't the most effective program, because many people will come with the desire or the main interest of drinking ayahuasca and having zero experience in permaculture. So that was that type of group, and there will be another group of people that will come for genuine connection, trying to get a connection with nature. And the jungle is a very difficult environment. It's hard, it's hot, it's humid, it's very different from what people in the north are used to. And I think like for many people was really struggling after working for so many hours. I mean, like after drinking medicine and just going into this so intimate process and just like fasting. Sometimes they have to do this like fast. Yeah, one of the facilitators will encourage them to do a brown rice fast for 14 days, and they will be like this, and then come to me, and I will be like, okay, guys, let's shovel, let's plant, let's do this, and well, with what comes with the physical strain of being there. But for me, it was a beautiful gift to be able to connect people to nature, people that have, and myself, because it's not that I had much experience. I always was born in a city, but this opportunity to teach people how to plant, to say, touch the seeds, to help people how to be in nature was really beautiful. Yeah, however, there was that disconnection of I come, I drink, these people serve me, these plants are not even plants, this is just this juice that takes me to out the space, out of a different realms, and this disconnection to earth was not easily accessible for everybody. Some people, yes, but other people, many people, it was tough to connect to nature. It was tough to be, at least at the beginning, it was a 3-month program. It was tough to be in the environment. But, I'm so sorry. I did like at the beginning, could be challenging to just leave. We didn't have electricity, we didn't have showers, running water, we have bucket showers. We didn't have like regular toilets, it was compost toilets. So at the beginning, myself, and I see the struggle in many for this different way of living. But after a while, it just felt so nurturing. Not having electricity, going to bed early, being with candles, not having phones, looking at the stars, and the body just becomes in alignment with nature. I miss it. I wish I could not live with electricity, but I can't. But there is something primal that awakens when people drop into the rhythms of nature, and when they are drinking medicine. It's just so beautiful, challenging, but it's ultimately very rewarding and very beautiful to go back to simplicity, living in these little huts, tiny bed, and being happy, living in community, lots of dramas, but finding our ways to solve. I feel like it was one of the most enriching times of my life, one of the most hardest times of my life as well. I used to have a lot of freedom when I was in New York. Got my own money, I knew where I was going, I had so much freedom. I choose everything, but when living in community, especially in the way that community was at the time, there was hierarchical, there was jobs, it was just recreating what we have outside. At the time, I don't know how it is now, but that was challenging for me. That was the most challenging for me, actually. And I think we are trying to remember ways of living. We are trying to create or remember ways of being healthier, because the way that we are living, our ways of living, especially in big cities, is unhealthy, and all what we see is the reflection of that unhealthiness, problems in our society, crime, problems, mental problems, physical problems. All that reflects the way that, as a collective, we are not actually living as we should be living. We are is out of balance. So I appreciate so much places that want to create a different way, or remember a different way of living, as hard as it is, and it's always very beautiful.
You said that, with all of the beauty and the struggle and everything, but one thing you said is that it felt like they were trying to recreate a system that was mimicked from the outside, like a kind of a hierarchical system where people had different jobs and authorities, hierarchies. Is there something looking back or something you've learned since then that leads you to think that there's a better way to do it that's based on another way of doing things?
For sure. I actually, when I went to Peru from New York, I had this seed planted in intentional communities. I don't know where I hear that, and in the permaculture program we talk about intentional communities, living in community. And my idea was to check how that happens. So I went to the Paititi, I went to the temple, and I actually saw a few other communities. And I talked to the permaculture teachers and people that did the programs in the US. And they were telling me that the hardest part is not the design, is not the planting, is not the environmental part. The hardest part is the relationships and how the structure is called social permaculture, how people relate to one another. Is where we get entangled with our egos, with our I am right, you are not right. And that is the hardest part. And I have seen this in other spiritual institutions that I've been part of, that also recreates. I'm the boss, I get this much amount, my say is more important. You are here, okay, you have this much to say, you earn this much. I take this much of decisions, you take this much of decisions, this person here doesn't take many decisions. And I feel like I'm in a place of observing. I have observed a lot of that, and I'm creating an organization with retreats, and the way that my organization works, which is completely transparent. We are 4 people working there. We every single thing related to money, because that tends to be money, power, tends to be the areas as humans we don't know how to. We are learning how to be better in these areas. So, like in my organization, everything is transparent. All the numbers are transparent, and we choose. Okay, how much? Okay, you work this. How much you want to get paid? In between the whole organization, and decision-making process is not hierarchical. It's more like one-on-one, which works for when there is 4 or 5 people in an organization. I think like it would be harder that with more people. However, I feel like there has to be a way, especially in business, to bring equality, because we see it, like 1% has everything, and people working so much have very little access to resources. So I believe that because that is the system that we have been living for, since monarchy, who knows for how long, we tend to recreate it. But there is other ways, and we have to ask ourselves these questions, because it's not working. We see it, it's not working. It's not make anybody happy.
Do you think there's a way of blending these two things? I mean, because it's something I think about a lot. But taking for example in the Amazon with these communities, which aren't necessarily intentional because they're also built upon really blood with relations. They're a people, like the Shipibo identify as Shipibo, or the Tubu identify as Tubu, or the Ashaninka identify as Ashaninka. So they're born already into a certain society. But it's also very fascinating because from my understanding, and again, I'm not an expert, but they are much more egalitarian in that way. One of the things I remember being a kid, and I forget where I heard this, but I was always very fascinated by North Native American cultures, and one of the kind of the sicknesses, they said, of the white man was that they didn't understand how in those societies a man could tell another man what to do. And I always found that very fascinating. And I think it's something that also really inspired my life, because you were talking about how we get kind of mareado, how we get dizzy under the influence of power. And I think it's something that a lot of us struggle with. And that's something that I find very beautiful, is this idea that no one truly has power over us, because that is the hierarchy. When you say, like, I can tell you what to do. And I think people don't also really think deeply about what that means as a whole. And so in a lot of these more traditional societies, there are these kind of egalitarian things where it's not, even that idea of chief was something that was really kind of, I think, imposed by the outside. Like, in these societies, it was more egalitarian. Everyone had their role, and roles weren't necessarily seen as better or worse. There was the dancer, there was the peacemaker, there was the warrior, there was the healer, there was the, this person, but they all had their role. But also those roles, people were born into them. So do you see that there's a way where we can kind of bridge those things? Because in a lot of the societies, like, we're not necessarily born into maybe a very strong, especially more and more, we're not born into a very strong lineage of, like, these are my people, or this is my community. And one of the things we also really value is this idea of, like, individual freedom of, well, I want to do this, or I want to do that, or much like you were saying, like, I don't want to be in the role that I was given of marrying and being a businesswoman or whatever. Like, I want that freedom of like, choosing my role. But that's also not always the case in a lot of these indigenous societies. Like, your role is given to you. It could be when you're born, or who you're born to, or, there's a lot of factors to that. But do you see ways of kind of bridging those worlds? Because we also live very differently from a lot of these indigenous societies. And yet at the same time, as you're saying, like, and I think a lot of people feel this, they're longing for something. They're longing for something that the societies they're living in are not giving them or fulfilling that longing. I know that's a huge question.
Let me see how I can respond this. Like, think in a way, we live differently, but we also create our own circles of belonging. So at the end of the day, without belonging to a bigger group, we will die. That is, we are gregarian creatures. We are born to be always among the support of a tribe, being our co-workers, being our family, being our friends, being the tribe of a soccer player team that we like. I don't remember where I read, but it was something like this. The individual, alone person is an illusion, is a myth. We're always in communion. However, this idea that we can do it by ourselves alone, that is a myth. That's not real, because we can't. It's always around. We are always living in society. So what I feel as this, as we are realizing, we go to this way. I feel like I could put it like myself as an example. So growing up in this society, very strong, you have to do this, very strong family all together, and then finding this individuality is like, no, I want to do it by myself, and then realizing that actually, no, there is something in between, this reclaiming my identity or creating like really strong identity, understanding who I am, and from that place coming into communion with other people. And I think that could be seen also as perhaps as a way of like seeing our path, let's say. I read about this. Like we came from these strong cultures, and all of a sudden this part of us as human, that this teenager path that wants to find this individuality, who am I, comes and lives like the hero journey and lives, and we are kind of like in that part now as society. I could see it, or I see it like that. We went into this me individualistic money driven society, and now there's like, oh, actually this is actually not really making me happy. I want to go back into heal. I want to go back into understanding my roots. I want to go back in understanding my ancestors and creating a way of being, and that can honor both, can honor the individual self, and that can honor this individual as part of a collective. Because if there is not a process of individualization, I think we miss this deep connection to parts of ourselves that are unique. That's why I feel like many try of like really put on in communist societies doesn't work either, and it is other individualistic like separate societies doesn't really work. We are seeing it. So there is this process of individualization that happen until we find, until we really connect deeply to who we are. And that requires a deep, deep introspection, deep like closets to oneself, you know? And from that point, from that strength that comes from self-knowledge, then we can come out in society and share and feel, this belonging. But this belonging starts with oneself. I strongly believe that we don't feel that we belong because there is a big pull to find who we are outside, and it is like it's both. It's here and it's out. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So then, what was that like? Because I would imagine, you know, when you're working there, your primary focus is on permaculture, on organizing, on doing your own work, on helping to organize other people. But you also began working with ayahuasca.
Yeah.
So what was? Can you kind of describe what that process was like? What because it was also, I think, kind of a new process of working with these sacred plants, and kind of what you learned, or what began to open, or what got you interested then in continuing to do that kind of work.
I think it was hard for me, harder than for other people, because I went there for permaculture. So many people would go knowing that they want to drink ayahuasca. They were like, this is it. I'm coming, flying, paying, leaving everything to come and commute with this medicine. But for me, it was like something that was given and was offered. And in a way, I had to do it because I was like living there. So at the beginning, I questioned it a lot. And I remember people were talking about healing. And I was like, what the hell? I was coming from very kind of like social activist path in my life, you know. I used to go to all these like protests and anti-war, like activism is always something I cherish. I actually cherish people that have this sense of kind of duty to the community. And I always find that fascinating. The archetype of the activist, the person that fights for justice, was always fascinating to me. And when I come to the plant medicine, I will see these individuals just looking for healing themselves. And I couldn't understand it. I was like, how could you take the time to do this? Why don't you think about others? But then it's funny, I was asked to do all my first ceremonies. I wasn't me, I want to do it. I was asked to do this retreat, these 2 retreats. It was like 14 ceremonies. And I really understand when people say like they have so much to heal, so much to heal. I didn't really understand what they were talking about, because apparently I was bottling up all my things and focusing like we have to help others. And when I started drinking medicine, it was like, wow. I'm sorry. I realized so much of my relationships with my family and how they were impactful for me. Relationships that I had when I was a teenager, like 50 years ago, and they had still a play in my consciousness and still an impact in my present life. And after that, I realized that, wow, there was so much to heal. So much, and that I could have never been effective without a deep recognition of what was stopping my path, or what was actually detrimental for myself. I think like I didn't fully look inside until I started drinking the medicine. I was forced to look inside and being in the environment of everybody's talking about healing. So that came and brought this deep questioning on what are the parts of me that are blocking my own growth? What are the wounds that I have, and can I look at them? So yeah, I feel like it was also like the connection with indigenous people, the maestras, they were living at the temple, the maestros, Shipibo people, and I was translating. I was actually, at that time, I was the only Spanish-speaking person that wasn't in a position of serving, cleaning dishes, and cooking. I was the only person that was bridging kind of like these worlds, because all the people that were working at the temple were foreigners, and all the people pretty much that come at the temple were foreigners from the US, Australia, or Europe. It was no Latin American, and that had an impact on me as well. but it was very beautiful to be the bridge between these cultures, and it's something that I actually kind of embrace as a path in my life.
That path of like bridge keeping.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's beautiful.
So you were saying already when you were in Quito, I guess in Ecuador, you became interested in things like meditation, maybe self-inquiry. Where did Buddhism come in? Because that's something you're now very interested in, and even when I met you, there was a lot of interest in wanting to learn more, work in those practices. How did that come into your life?
Actually, it was in New York when I was start getting interest in that, and mainly yoga. And the yoga after the class, the meditation part of the yoga was always cherished to me. When I left Ecuador, I was a mess. I was a big mess when I left Ecuador at 24. When I went to New York, things became better in one way because I was stable. I was forced to be stable. Nobody takes care of me there. If I don't work and I don't put it together, I will be in the streets. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna get better. And a big part of this moving of energies, of this dealing with anxiety, depression, full on, in a time where I had no money and there was no therapies, or nobody would talk like now that everybody has a therapist and there is these plant medicines and all these things. Somehow, like, I think it was intuition, just kept me pulling myself into embodiment. So I would do a lot of physical activity, a lot of like bike riding. I always say like biking saved my life. And then like I started doing yoga, but among other like physical, somatic and embodiment practices, that at the time, like the spiritual part was a component, but at the time it was like being in the body and like understanding how this connection of body mind was so important. And like for me, this physical activity support my well-being, and it was like, and it is still like very important for me. And while living at and that because of the yoga, I got a little interested in meditation and other ways of being with the mind. But it wasn't until I went to the Temple of the Well of Light, and there was so many interesting people there, that I hear about this 10-day retreat, this Vipassana 10-day retreat that's supposed to be as harder than an ayahuasca retreat. Back then I was like, okay, this is hard, and I like that. I have this, and I always was drawn to monastic life since I was a teenager. Even though I was wild, a part of me wanted to become a nun, and I did like a little nun retreat for a few days, and part of me was always been attracted to this like ascetic practice life. And after 3 years of living at the temple, I left the temple of the Way of Light, and somehow I end up being hired by this woman who now is a lama, a Buddhist lama, but back then she was working with the medicine at the temple as well, and she also was really into these Buddhist practices. And as soon as she hired me to organize a retreat, an ayahuasca retreat with her, but as soon I hear about these practices, there was such a pull. There was like, I have to do this. I have to get involved in these practices. And that was my reason for helping this woman establishing and doing this retreat, because there is something that I wanted to learn and I have no clue of how to start. You know, it's different when you come from, and it's different now. This is like 14 years ago, perhaps 10 years ago. In Peru, I'm a Latin person. These things were not in our awareness. It's not like when you are in Peru and you are born knowing that there is Catholicism and a range of practices and religions is different. So I didn't have a clue how to follow this path, but I hear about this 10-day retreat, and I went to the 10-day retreat, and it was like, wow. I realized that all the work that I was doing with the medicine, I actually wasn't paying attention to my mind. I was actually believing every single thing that my mind was saying. And then when I went to the 10-day retreat, this like, oh, you shouldn't be believing all this. It's not actually real. And this different understanding of how to be in the world, and this different understanding of how to work with medicine just start emerging from Vipassana practice, which is my main practice. And I think it's a great synergy of being aware, being mindful, being present is always good in every single thing you do. So plant medicine is always going to be good as well. So that is how it started, and from there I've been blessed enough to have these two paths always interwoven in my life. I work for a organization that emerged these two paths, the Buddha's teachings and plant medicine for many years, like 8 years. And this has been kind of like my main, my main path. And there's so much to learn, there is so much to learn in both paths.
And what does Buddhism mean to you?
A beautiful road of understanding what means to be human, what means to be alive, and what means to having a happier and healthier life. A means to bring more love, more compassion to our relationships with oneself and with everything around us. A means to calm a little bit like the suffering in the world, which is what the Buddha tried to do, like create through this deep awareness, through his understanding in the times of enlightenment. He just saw how much pain there is in the world and how much of that pain is caused by our unawareness, from the unawareness of thought, the unawareness of our words, our actions. So for me it's like how to live better, how to live with compassion and care and heart. Yeah.
You said a really interesting thing that I think many people, when they begin working with plants or other practices, there's always this kind of split or chasm, which is, you said, like, I was believing all of my thoughts when I was working with ayahuasca, and in general, we believe most of our thoughts to be true. Have you seen or have you learned ways to differentiate? Because certainly one of the things that ayahuasca or certain plants can do is to teach us. That's why they're also called often teacher plants or master plants. And how to differentiate that knowledge that's coming from, depending on our cosmovision, from the plant, from God, from spirit, from our higher self. Versus, as you were saying, like maybe things that are arising that I'm believing, but they may not be true. They may be coming from just my normal patterning or my normal self or my ego, maybe as some people may say. So, like what that differentiation is between what's true and what's not true.
I think a lot of have to do with not just focusing right here, the thought, but actually bringing awareness to the physical sensations. And in a ceremony, we could have this awesome, fantasy world, and the body, like mind could be here, body completely disconnected. But what these practices point, and it's funny because like mindfulness things like so much focus on the mind, but however, the focus is actually coming out of here and bringing awareness into the whole body, because there is so much wisdom, so much information that is passing through our heart, our body, that is moving through our bodies. So I am always trust more the wisdom of the body than the wisdom of the mind, because every second we are having like one thought, and happy thought and sad thought. So in life and in working with plant medicine, this understanding, trying to go back into more of the wisdom of the heart and corroborate it with the mind, becomes like a more reliable source of guidance, let's say. And time. I feel like there is many ideas that come when we are in the medicine, so much information that can happen. So you just gotta observe it, just be with it, and just pass it through the like kind of awareness of pass it through time and see what happens. I always say that even though we have like this incredible information and many things like feel right, and they feel important, let's wait a little bit to see what happens with life. And how do we embody? My main thing right now, after working with so many years with plants, and is actually how do we embody the teachings? How do we actually live the life in the day by day, the life that ayahuasca is pointing to us? Because I feel all these plants, ayahuasca, wachuma, these incredible beings, these incredible spirits, are teaching us how to be more harmonious, are teaching us harmony, how to live in harmony with our past relationships, with our family, with our environment, with our thoughts, with our body. And they are marking, they are saying like, this is it, you forgive this, you cry this, you let go of this, and perhaps like moving to this to-do list, always very common, that when you have a ceremony, you've got like, okay, I have to do this, and call this person. And there is this like pull into wholeness that the medicine is bringing to us. But what happens after? And I think like, actually I deviate from your question a little bit, but one of my ways of knowing that is so higher source of wisdom that my own crazy mind is this pointing into wholeness, is this pointing into goodness, is this pointing into connection, is this what I'm receiving is creating more harmony, or is inflating me and separating me from the others and creating this grandiose idea of myself. Grandiose idea, probably your ego. Connection to others, feelings of compassion, feelings of harmony, higher self.
That idea of embodiment, I mean, I think a lot with this plant work now, there's this very more and more common idea of integration. But I think embodiment is another way of also expressing that same idea, which is just as you said, like, how do I embody that knowledge? How do I integrate it into my life? Because obviously, like, there's that knowledge can just exist as knowledge, but then that's all it is. It's just knowledge. And so how do we bring it into our lives? How do we embody it? Are there better ways from your experience of working with plants to allow us to embody it? Or do you think there's specific practices that can or should be done in accompaniment with plant medicine to really begin to do that? Because I think even from a more indigenous perspective, like I always remember this one story, because often at the temple, as you said, like one of the roles that we filled was this bridge, this bridging of language, of translating from the Shipibo to English, from Spanish to English, but also world visions, cosmovisions, ways of being that bridge. And I remember this one example quite early on when I was translating, and it was a guy from Mexico, so he spoke Spanish. So in a way, we didn't have to bridge. So he was speaking Spanish, and he was speaking about his first ceremony, and it was in the consultation. And he had this amazing first ceremony, and he was connecting with all these things. And he said, I found my spirit animal, and I forget what it was, but he was so happy and proud, and but it was very much kind of this idea of me and what I found, and look at me. And part of that translation is also kind of sometimes being a bit easy with how the Shipibo respond to that. But in that situation, we didn't, because they spoke Spanish. So they kind of all looked at each other, and one of the female maestras just said to him, point blank, "Oh, don't worry, we'll clean that out of you tomorrow." And you could just see like this, like caving in of like, because he was expecting, wow, that's
Yeah, it's
amazing.
amazing.
You're obviously chosen. You have this amazing connection to the plant. But my point of all of that was, I think in a lot of these traditional cultures, they're much more embodied. They're much more grounded in that way. I think in a lot of this work, and again, it's not inherently bad, but there's more of this fascination of like the astral, of the going outside of our body, of the mind, of the fantasies as well, which are extremely valuable. They're also extremely important. But sometimes with these plants, especially like a plant with ayahuasca, which it does take us to all of these different levels, there's not maybe as much of a focus on embodiment of what does that actually mean? What does that mean in my life, in my reality? And if we don't put that into this world, then I think in a way we're also not honoring the plant, because the plant is asking us to embody it, because that's what we are. We're a body. So how do we embody the spirit of that plant? So kind of a long question, but do you find there's ways of working with these plants that more naturally lead to that embodiment, or do you think there's other practices that we can do that can really help with that?
For sure. I feel like this tendency of leaving the body, this tendency of not being here, this is exactly, and I think like I'm so grateful because I come from these lenses of the Buddhist practice. It's like, get me out of there. And the Buddha is, no, it's actually the true awakening comes from true embodiment, true like incarnating fully in this life, in this body, as hard as it is. So I seen, and I did it myself as well, like the plant and these incredible teachings and incredible realms that we can get through working with the medicines can also take us out of the body. And there is many people that, including myself at the beginning especially, that find this fascination with the outside, the beautiful realm, sometimes beautiful, sometimes horrible, but kind of like disconnect to the wisdom of the body. And I done it so many times, like, okay, drink more, like I have to move this energy. Okay, I don't like this blockage, and gotta heal my dad, I gotta heal my mom, I gotta heal this and that. And it becomes this eternal loop of healing that is actually preventing from being. And being happens in the body. Being happens when we are aware and we breathe, in the yoga with the mind and the body are in the same place. So what I'm doing now, and I seen it also like an emphasis more in this integration, is practices like meditation practice is a presence embodiment practice, yoga practice, movement. How can I be? How can I feel my body? And also like taking quite a while, like have a ceremony and take time for this ceremony to sink. Take time for these teachings to be fully seen, to be fully understood. Sorry, my throat is dry. I feel like right now for me is a lot about not too much medicine, because I come from a time of like holding retreats, doing like always like drinking a little bit of medicine, always like having years of like 5 retreats, 7 ceremonies, 6 ceremonies, and traveling so much that I didn't have a home, a ground, and that was detrimental. So now I'm like, whew, ceremony, beautiful, but what am I doing in the day-to-day basis? How are my relationships? Am I waking up early? Am I sleeping over? Nothing bad about that, but how do I want to live the day by day? is this day by day reflecting what I would like for my life, what the teachings of the plants have brought me to, and how is my mind going. It's like I use a lot of meditation because I'm a fan. Exercise, not as much lately, but yoga, communion with people, having like a normal life, being aware of how I relate to people, and just connecting to what are my intentions in life. And I feel like plant medicine is so incredible to clear stock energy, support us in healing, allowed us to bring forgiveness, to move forward, to kind of like become more present. Because when we have ties to traumas, it's like a part of our consciousness is still there. So what plant medicine is like, okay, let's clear this out so you can be here. And honoring, as you said, plant medicine is being here. And yeah, for me it's just like, how can I be better, or how can I be just here in a way that is authentic to my heart, and in a way that is authentic to my spirit, in a way that I can generate more goodness in this world. I don't know if that counts as practice, but
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
So where do you see this intersection with Buddhism and plant medicine? Because I think for a lot of people, there's seemingly very, very different paths. When I started doing this work, one of the interesting things that I really noticed when I was teaching and then facilitating is often some of the more difficult cases that I saw, and at the same time credit to these people, but they were often Buddhist practitioners, and credit to them, meaning that they actually came and worked with plant medicine, because I think for a lot of people, that's still to this day, although I think less and less, seen as something that's very counterindicated to Buddhism. Like working with a plant is like, it's a big no-no. It's seen as I'm going outside of not only the tradition, but like outside of what they see are these core teachings of Buddhism, is I'm reaching or I'm grasping for something that's outside of myself, where everything that I need is inside of myself. And I think in an ultimate level that's true, but at the same time, I think it's been said, like, if you have a tool, use it, because all of these things are tools in a way. But what I saw from a lot of those people was, interestingly, you were talking about embodiment, but what I saw was almost inevitably those people were also very much attached to their mind, to how they viewed Buddhism, which was coming from a certain worldview, from grasping at certain things, from living very strict in a way of what they believed was true and what was not true. And it wasn't coming from a place of openness, but it was coming from a place of rigidity. And I think, again, part of that is a worldview. Like you were speaking in the beginning, like this idea of separation is an illusion. And I think one of the things that really drew me to these practices, because even when I started, like when we met, I was working in a plant medicine center, but I was teaching meditation and martial arts and yoga. And for me, those things were never separate. Like I was always looking for the thing that connected all of them, because for me, I saw truth in all of them. And, maybe to my own detriment as well. But that's always what interested me, was that commonality. Like, what can I take from all of these things that are pointing to a truth? And, even today, like now, I think there's a number of books, and a lot of people may disagree with the premise, but that even in Buddhism, they were also working with plants. Also I practice martial arts, and I think it's another one of those things where, I don't know if you remember, but there was a lot of resistance when I was teaching martial arts, because it was seen as something that was not compatible with plant medicine, even though the Shipibo, who we were working with, one of their main practices was also martial arts. They were wrestlers, they were fighters, that was their tradition was wrestling, men with men, women with women, even, fighting each other with knives to cut the back of the neck. I mean, it was very much an embodied practice as well. And even that idea of martial arts, I mean, it was, from most accounts, it was started by Indian or Chinese monks, religious people. Yeah. So in that way, for me, I saw that all of these things were connected, and even the traditional healers of Tibet, of China, of India. I mean, even though they were monks or practicing spirituality, one of their main practices was also herbalism, working with plants. This idea that things weren't separate, that integrative aspect of healing meant working with what you had, working with all of these things, because they were all tools, they were part of that healing. And I think even when you look at, for example, Tibetan Buddhism, I mean, it's very shamanic. I mean, it's very difficult to argue with that. I mean, if you're working with ayahuasca and you're looking at some of those Buddhist images, I mean, it's all about different spirits, different gods, different archetypes, different ideas of different realms, of lower realms, of middle realms, of upper realms, of going through these different states of samsara, of going into different aspects of the mind, of fear, of doubt, of longing, of grasping, but very visually pointing towards something. And I think we even see that now in other religions. Like, I think people are more maybe familiar now that even in Vedic religions, which is where Hinduism came from, there was this idea of working with soma, or in Zoroastrianism, working with homa. There's a lot of now research into early Christianity that very likely they were also working with very strong plants as well. So, my sense is, as time goes on, these kind of separations are beginning to dissolve. Much like in martial arts, which I often use the example, is it was very similar. There was kung fu, and there was tai chi, and there was jujitsu, and there was judo, and there was boxing and wrestling, and they were seen as something very different. But really what's emerging is now what's called mixed martial arts, meaning like, how do you draw on the truth, on the beauty of all of them, and not see them as separate? Because when they were seen as separate, what was shown very clearly is they all fail. They all fail. Because you're accepting certain things and then not accepting other things, and so you're at a disadvantage. And I think even in like the shamanic path, it's very similar in that, traditionally, the good shaman would go to another tribe to learn their medicine.
Yes.
Because it was seen that other tribes also had medicine, and how do you incorporate that? How do you learn that? So, again, kind of a big question, but I think for, actually it's quite simple, but that idea of, for so many people, I think those ideas of Buddhism and plant medicine are seen as something very, very different, like almost not compatible. And so can you kind of speak about from your experience, from working with these, like, how are they compatible? How do they join? How can you have a foot in both worlds and bring them together?
The idea, it's interesting that you touched on this separation, and in the roots of many traditions, there is this, there's always been a connection to plants and altered states of consciousness. It's always, as humans, there is a drawn for being in a different type of consciousness. And that is kind of like the root of like meditation practice or Buddhist practices, is coming from this entangled state of consciousness of like being over focused on the mind and the thoughts, to awareness of what is present, just like separating from being in this turmoil of being caught in emotions and thought patterns, into connecting to the one that sees, to the wise one that sees. And these stages I found a lot in plant medicine. One of the plants that I like to work with now a lot is Wachuma. And the name of Wachuma in Quechua means cut in the head, which means like beyond this understanding of life, understanding of the world, lies this understanding that is embodied understanding. So you cut the head, no more thoughts. What do you feel? The heart, feel your body more. So, yeah, in my own experience, the connection to Buddhist practices, as I said at the beginning, is like this map and this road into a different way of relating to life and relating to one another. And sometimes that road is not clear marked with shamanic practices. It's more about taking the medicine, understanding oneself, and then what? Let me think how I think this. How do I respond the question? Can we elaborate it more?
I mean, basically, just what is that dance between Buddhism and plant medicine? Like, how do you see those two walking together? Because again, I think for a lot of people, they're very separate paths. Like Buddhism means sitting in the lotus position, meditating, renunciating things, living a more austere life, not identifying with thoughts. For a lot of people, plant medicine is not religious at all. It's anti-religious. Much as I said, some of the Buddhist people were not so compatible with plant medicine. A lot of times plant medicine people are not so compatible with religion because they have their own ideas of religion.
So interesting, because I've been working in these Buddhist retreats for years. So all the people that come to us are Buddhist practitioners. And I have served medicine to lamas, few Buddhist lamas. And this wanting to, or this this attraction for something that is different from this reality, I think that both traditions have. Like what is beyond this day by day experience. One, the Buddhist practice, you reach the states, you can reach very deep states that are similar to the states that are reached with ayahuasca. However, ayahuasca is just much faster.
Much faster.
Sorry, been talking a lot today. So with ayahuasca, you can reach this state. In Buddhist practices, to achieve these states will take a long time. It will take months of solitude, which has a benefit because you are walking in with ayahuasca or other plant medicines. You are on a road, on a rocket. So while you are doing this in a small, really minute by minute awareness, and reaching these other states of being, of consciousness, and becoming aware of these states of consciousness, there is a lot of clarity that arises. While when you are reaching these states of consciousness super fast, it could be confusing. It could be very confusing. And I feel like in my case, coming from first from plant medicine and then to meditation practices was a way of understanding plant medicine much better, because it was slower, because it was more embodied, it was less believing in the head. I feel that in the roots of Buddhist practices, this connection, there is always this curiosity for different ways, for curiosity for consciousness. How are we seeing? So it was connecting back to what is consciousness. And many teachers, many teachers, especially Western teachers back in the 70s, they were using psychedelics. They were using a lot of psychedelics before or during or after they engage in these practices, like Ramdas, like even Jack Kornfield. He had a state in his life where he was using peyote. Joan Halifax, who is Zen master, all these teachers, they all were attracted to both paths at the same time, or one was the door to the other path, because there was this inquiry in consciousness. And this is how I like to work personally with plant medicines. I always go back into who is the one that is experiencing this. Giant revelations, visions, all this. Who is the one that is experiences? I have worked a lot with DMT as well, smoking DMT, which is so fast. Who is the one that is experiences? And for me, it kind of allows me, when I work in that way with plant medicine, it allows me to connect to this aspect of myself that is consciousness itself. Just like, and kind of like try to identify myself with consciousness. So that's how I practice when I drink medicine. Also, like meditation is deeply healing, because we are, and plant medicine is deeply healing. When you are going to a long meditation retreat, you are sitting there observing yourself. At some point, all the things that you are running away from, because we are experts in running away from our traumas, our problems, the things that we don't want to see. We distract ourselves all the time in our regular life. But when you are sitting there, you are forced to see your life. All the memories of things that happens inevitably will come. And what is required is that you see, observe, and through these observations, the energy of the memory, the place where it is locked, that trauma, that emotion, that energy, start opening up, it starts changing, it starts shifting, and we become more conscious, and we become more attuned, and also like we become familiar with our parts of ourselves that have been left out. And it's exactly the same that happens with ayahuasca. Much faster though, in like slow motions with meditation. And it could be like full on, like when you go deep into a meditation retreat, all these energies, it could be like as intense as like an intense ceremony. However, with ayahuasca it's faster. You go, you remember, you have the vision of the memory, you purge the trauma. With meditation, it's like slow. And I see these two complementing pretty well, because in my personal experience, I have had so much healing with ayahuasca. But it was so fast that it didn't allow me to just like repair, didn't allow me to go into, perhaps ayahuasca was taking, and ayahuasca and Wachuma as well. I love Wachuma. They were taking these big energies out of my system, but the residue is still there, and the residue of this that manifests as like subtle sadness or subtle, I don't know, like some like emotions that are in the background and it's still there. The moment that I pay attention to it, then I kind of like recover or like become whole. Like this awareness helps us to become whole. And it's the same awareness that is required to be in a process of healing with plant medicine. Because we are not, when we go there, we are there to face our shadows. We are there to care for the shadows. It's pretty much the same process. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Do you find similarities in these worldviews? Because often, for example, in a more traditional, maybe shamanic or plant medicine worldview, they're speaking about things like spirits, about different realms of dimensionality, about facing demons, about facing heavy energies, about connecting with the light or God. and in Buddhism, you can, I don't know, maybe have similar things of again, these
sure.
realms of samsara, of facing these kind of demonic forces, or becoming detached. I mean, even the idea of the Buddha, someone who's surpassed this, that's also a very common archetype in a more traditional shamanic lineage. Like for the Shipibo, the idea of the Maraya, the one who's no longer attached to his or her body. They can be a jaguar, they can be an eagle, they can see things from different perspectives because they also are those things. Their consciousness isn't bound to a particular body. They've broken down the walls of the house. They've been allowed to see things from a different perspective. So, do you find there's commonalities in those worldviews?
You are saying the commonalities. Yeah, there is. Like, I remember once we were working with the Shipibo shaman, and a person asked, just like similar to what happened to you, but it was in a group. So he was asking something in these lights of like, I felt like I was attacked by this energy, and this thing attacked me, and what is that is attacking me? And it was like beautiful. I think that you remember Diogenes was super sweet. So Diogenes like stopped and he said, is this something out there? The person was like, is something out there to get me and attack me? And Diogenes quietly said, Sid, it's like, it's your own mind. Which is really interesting because we could call it like spirits, we could call it mental states. There is no what is in, what is out. It's like it could be like somebody's energy that latches into your energy field because there's a resonance in that. Or it could be your own mind's projection. It's like really hard to pinpoint or be like, this is the right way or this is the wrong way to see it. It's just, I think, at the end of the day, we're trying to put words into something that is very hard to put words. And I follow Theravada Buddhism, which is the kind of like the old Buddhism, and it's more practiced in Thailand, in Myanmar, and seems to be more logical. However, this was kind of they had since the roots the shamanic and spiritual way of seeing life. And in the Buddhist practices, there's the same. There is like realm of consciousness, the hungry ghosts. It's this type of consciousness that we have when there is nothing, this greed that is so big that nothing can satisfy us. And we could see that. It doesn't have to be a realm like somewhere in a different world. It's actually right here. And it's actually a type of consciousness. So I think like both are pointing into the same directions. It's like these places, but these places are part of our consciousness, as part of our reality in the world, and they are manifested as well. I remember being in Thailand, and in Thailand they had these little houses. And it's like a Buddhist country, but they have these little houses that they make and they put in the entrance of the house for the spirits. So they feed the spirits. And I was told about this book, I will tell you at some point, which talks about the history of Theravada Buddhism and how Western people kind of like got more interested in it and took out the more like folkloric spiritual part of it to make it more logical and appealing. But there is a lot of that magic component, this unknown component, which also is part of shamanic practices. And if we think about like a Catholic, we think about like angels, demons, there is also an aspect of this spiritual world that we cannot see, however, is a type of consciousness. It's Could be interpolated terms. That's how I see it.
Yeah. So when you're running these retreats where you're working with plant medicine, albeit ayahuasca or Wachuma, and you're also working with these Buddhist practices, how does that look like on a practical level? Like how are you bridging those things?
It's very practical for me because I work with subjects that can be, that everybody can understand. So I don't go into emptiness and there is nothing. I will talk, we will meditate, we will connect to the body, we will kind of like invite people to bring awareness of their experiences and awareness of the body while they are in the state of the medicine. Okay. Then, so because in the medicine you could dissociate. It's very easy to dissociate. And usually when people start screaming, all that, they are very far from their body. But there is another way of navigating these realms that is more present. So the invitation and encouragement is like, I could be far away, feeling, and at the same time, I could also be feeling my heart. And that makes it, sometimes it's not possible when it's like a full-on ceremony, but that embodiment gives you access to the wisdom of the body through the ceremony. So there is always an invitation to embodiment. There is always an invitation to, when there is times where big emotions are happening, sometimes people don't even know what is going on. Okay, what are you feeling? Okay, is sadness. Okay, how does that feel in your body? Okay, it feels here. Bring the hand into your heart. And that unravels and allows healing to happen. Actually, this like deep connection to the body, somatic experience allowed healing and allows these energies to be moved like easily, like more consciously, with more care, with more compassion. There's also a lot of emphasis in compassion practices, emphasis in forgiveness practices, and bringing these subjects into the mind. It's just like a tiny or Dharma talk into what it means to be compassionate, what it means to forgive. And I like to talk about interconnected of all beings. I like to talk about the Four Noble Truths. I will talk different subjects, but in a way that can be, because those teachings are like, when we talk about the Four Noble Truths and we talk about, which is like the classic basic teachings of the Buddha, we talk about there is suffering. It's not that you did something wrong. It's not that it's unconsciousness cause suffering, and we suffer. So that brings, like, bringing awareness into these teachings could also be a supportive way for people to understand their own life and their own reality. And the way I'm doing this is meditation, emphasis in meditation, emphasis in embodiment, and in emphasis in certain core teachings that can be translated and can be supporting to the healing of the person. Also, like, can bring the mind into a different state. Something I love a lot about the Buddhist teachings is like bodhicitta, which is part of Mahayana more than Theravada, which is like other kind of like ramification of the Buddhist. But the bodhicitta means this the consciousness of the awakened being. So if you were Jesus or the Buddha or like an awakened being, what would they be thinking of? And they would be thinking of supporting everybody, because they know that there is a deep interconnection with every being. So like planting that seeds of, instead of like me, my healing, it's like, let's plant the seed that our healing is for our families, for our country, for our ancestors, like, and that at a practical level, like a Buddhist level, it breaks a little bit this attachment to the solid self and this attachment to the ego and separate self, and it starts creating this awareness that we actually not separate, that we are part of this great wave of life, and that includes our parents and ancestors, the spirit world, the plants, and everything. So when we start like kind of like tossing these sweet teachings, it just supports us, so we can see the world in a different way and become less individual and more together, and also have a purpose of doing this work. I feel like it's really hard to do this type of work if you are doing it just for yourself. It's really hard to just find the motivations, and the Buddhist path with emphasis in healing and awakening and compassion, and these practices just like open the heart so we can go through the healing, and it's a little easier.
Do you find, for example, when you're, I mean, I would imagine obviously all of the people are coming are very open to both of these paths as well. When you're working with someone maybe who's worked with plant medicine, and then you're giving them these Buddhist tools or practices, do you find it's helping them to better understand their experience of working with plants? And maybe conversely in the same way, like you said, you were giving plant medicine like ayahuasca to lamas. In that sense, do you find that plant medicine is helping them to already see what they've seen or understood in a different way, or it's also in a way giving them a different way of looking as well, or is it some combination of both?
Definitely like some combination of both, and the states that one can reach with plant medicine, with different substances, are very hard to reach if you don't have like a full-on constant practice and you go into retreat for many months. So one thing that I did, this is like in my personal experience, I went to a very long retreat, and after that very long retreat I had LSD, which is not conventional medicine, but I feel like it's the respect that I have for that substance is very big for me. And I was able to see, like, I was reading of all these teachings on emptiness and, these concepts that are concepts when you are reading it. And they become a little more tangible when you have a little bit of practice. But when you have this understanding in the mind, then you have a substance, and this understanding comes from like our logical, and we are trying to understand, but then this substance that is so powerful comes, and you have the seed planted on this. It's just like, it's like a way of connecting to these teachings in a more tangible form. And I've seen that many times with Buddhist practitioners, that their practice, because it's hard to establish a practice unless you're a monk and you're meditating a long time. In this world, it's really hard to go to reach these levels. And at some point, people reach a plateau, whether at the beginning, because they came from zero to nothing, from zero to like a regular practice or like a 10-day retreat. There's so many insights and a lot of healing. But at some point, I have witnessed that it reached a plateau, and these plant medicines could just ignite, and it could also like show more clearly realms of consciousness and untied knots that would have taken a long time to tie with with just practice. And it's not for everybody though. I have to say it. It's not, plant medicine is not for everybody. Long retreat is not for everybody. Mindfulness is for everybody. You have more consciousness for everybody, but yeah, I think like they complement in the way that I see it. There is one of the precepts in the Buddhist tradition that talks about intoxicants. And when it was written, it was referring to like an alcoholic drink. But now it's like extrapolated to every single thing that can be intoxicant. So some people think like the plant medicine is an intoxicant. But the reason of this precept is about you drink alcohol, then you are not completely aware, and therefore you break these other precepts. You start acting harmful for people. So it's not about the drinking itself, it's what it does to your consciousness, so you harm others and yourself. And with plant medicine can be a beautiful tool to make us more aware and to heal. So, and also like to bring more clarity about our lives and about our paths and our future and what is important for us. So it actually doesn't cloud the mind. Could cloud the mind.
You said, in your view, plant medicine isn't for everyone. Who do you think plant medicine is not for?
There has to be a deep calling to it. It cannot be something that somebody's pushing you to. It never works like that. And people with certain mental conditions, pathologies, schizophrenia, bipolar disorders, it could exacerbate their conditions. So it has to be taken with a lot of responsibility because it is such a strong substance, ayahuasca, wachuma. Especially I'm talking about ayahuasca because it's the one that I have more experience with, and it's the one that has become more famous. But it's substances that have to be taken with a lot of care and a lot of respect and a lot of intention, and with cautious, because sometimes we have our minds could be fragile, and people that are going through so much, they need to be grounded before taking these substances. I would not advise somebody that is going through a full-on separation, death, or something that is already stabilizing, to at that moment to take plant medicine, because it could be even more destabilizing. So it requires a strain of body and mind to be engaging with the plant medicine.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned Wachuma, and I think a lot of people are familiar with that, Wachuma, San Pedro. What has that journey been like for you? Because you started with ayahuasca, now you're also living in an area where Wachuma grows. How would you describe that plant medicine, and also maybe how do you find it different from your work with ayahuasca?
I love Wachuma. I'm like, you'd say the word Wachuma, I'm like, yay. It makes me very happy. It's a plant that resonates with my spirit at this time more than ayahuasca. I feel like ayahuasca, when it came to my life, it was a time for a lot of deep healing and deep energetic movements and deep like trauma healing that require medicine that was as strong as ayahuasca in the tradition that I was following, that was the Shipibo tradition, which is one of the tradition that has let's say a vibration as a focus into shadow work. So at that time was very needed. And however, like I had Wachuma for years before now, and it always felt I always had a deep love for this medicine. It's a medicine of presence. It's a medicine that doesn't have the visions. It's a medicine that could be visionary, but most it will be just like enhancing what we already see, not like full-on visions as other medicines, or ayahuasca in particular. But this quality of bringing oneself to the body, this quality to cutting the head, cutting the thought process, and allowing me and allowing us to be in contact to deeper wisdom that comes from this connection of the heart, this connection to full. I talk a lot about embodiment, by the way, for this connection of full other way of living, the embodied way of living, something that I appreciate from Wachuma a lot. I found it less confusing than ayahuasca because of the fact that it's less visionary and it's more embodied. I find Wachuma is a plant that connects us to the heart. Everybody will say that. It's like I see it like this. Like ayahuasca, there is a big component of like root chakra, healing through this like more like root chakra, like lower chakras, ancestor healing. But from that point of view, Wachuma is the same healing. You could heal your ancestors, but with a more open heart, with this ability to create this understanding and create this healing through this awareness of that we can have when we have an open heart, and that goes very well with me. Also, I love the earthiness. There is I think it's because I am from the Andes in Ecuador. I plant a lot of Wachuma in my house. I plant a lot of Wachuma as well, but there is like a groundness that we have with ayahuasca, with Wachuma. Also, with Wachuma, the journeys are long. And because the journeys are long, the integration can happen in the same journey. It's not like with ayahuasca, it could be like a stretch, incredible, powerful, but like 4 hours of like, whoa. But with Wachuma, you're like a little bit slow. It's like, it could be intense at times, and then you go down a little bit. And this allows for the body to also move in that rhythm, for the consciousness and understanding to move in that longer rhythm of ceremony. With ayahuasca, I know it's not the same for everybody, but for a lot of people, and certainly for me, it would be in the mat. I could not move. I wouldn't feel, at least at the beginning, perhaps at the end of ceremony, this rush of energy and beautiful presence. But with Wachuma, this energy of the sun, this energy as like a masculine, let's say, it's like yang plant, like strong. So this strain, this chi, is very present. So I have deep reverence for both plant medicines, but I feel like this time in my life, Wachuma is the one that is calling me. And also, like, I work with mushrooms as well. But at this time, after I learned so much with ayahuasca, I felt this pull to learning from Wachuma.
So what is your work now? You also do retreats with Wachuma, with mushrooms as well? You integrate Buddhist practices into those?
Yeah, I'm always integrating Buddhist, like meditation, into all my life. I have a few little things that I'm doing. One of them is retreats. It's called Pachanoi retreats. Pachanoi is the Latin name of Wachuma. So I started last year, and we work with it's in a format, 10-day format retreat, and we have 3 ceremonies, which, by the way, is like a lot because it's a whole 24-hour ceremony. And kind of like the pillars of the retreat is this work with Wachuma, the plant medicine. We also incorporate meditation, yoga practices. I don't know, do you remember Uli? Oh, I think I have to show you.
Yeah, and
From
now that
Vienna.
you mention, yes, I do. Yeah.
I work with him,
Mm-hmm.
like a 25 years plus yogi. So it's really beautiful to have that person that brings the emphasis in the body during the retreat. And we also connect to the indigenous traditions from here. During the retreat, we go to different powerful places because there is so much energy, so much magic here in these mountains, in this land. So, well, those are the retreats that I started last year. And to this year, we have 2 retreats in July and October. So there's one part. The other part that I am creating is a wellness center here in Pisac that is going to be open on 2 weeks, and that is very exciting for me because it comes from this deep this deep wanting for myself, this wanting of be strong in my body, be in my body, take care of my body, take care of my mind, take care of, because as I was saying, these practices could be very mental, and people go into the retreat and barely moves. So there's something that for me is not like balanced there, and I find that by creating a space that welcomes people, that is focused in diversity. We have a lot of diversity here, mestizo people, indigenous people, foreign people, and has and works with martial arts. I would love that. Or we have machines, we have personal trainers and classes in nutrition, classes in physiotherapy, how to take care of the body. I had a crazy surgery in my knees years ago, and I have to be in bed for 9 months, or learn how to walk again for a long time. It took me 9 months to walk back. So I have this different approach and different view of my body now. So I have created this wellness center. It's called Vida Wellness Center. That is another project. I also have a class in the Sacred Valley in Pisac called Plant Medicine, Secret Plant Medicine and the Buddhist Teachings. And I would love you to come. We talk about different teachings. And for example, last class is on Fridays. Last class was on non-clinging, non-attachment, letting go, and how that, what is the teaching of the Buddha regarding that, what is our experience regarding that, and how that's manifest in ceremony or in the teachings of the plants. So it's kind of like this, because this is very new, this merge of this kind of trying to see or find the commonalities between these 2 practices is something pretty new. So we just discuss, and we just try to get the wisdom of every participant and see what is our experience. And this is a very dear class to me. Yeah, I think that's it. those are all my projects.
Beautiful. Is there anything we didn't touch on that you'd like to talk about before we wrap up?
No, I don't think so. I think we had a beautiful conversation.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Janeth. It was a pleasure to reconnect. It's been a long time, and I think a long time in the making, and you're a lovely person, and I think you're doing beautiful work. And if people are interested to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that? Through your website?
Yeah, that will be the best way. Yeah, and there is another website that I will be creating. I'm not the most technological person. It's have to, but yeah, that will be the best way.
Well, beautiful. I really wish you all the best, and I'd love to come and participate anytime you'd like. So.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much for inviting me. Such a pleasure.
All right, everyone. That's it. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Janeth. It was really a pleasure for me to sit down and talk with her, and also, as always, learn a bit more about her background. Sometimes even these people we're close with, we don't know everything about them. So I hope you found that interesting, those topics of her work with plants, the intersectionality of Buddhism. I think it's a really interesting topic. So I think that's it. As always, if you're able to support this podcast, that's a really big help to me. Patreon is a really good option. You can sign up for as little as $1 a month. There's different tiers you can sign up for. Also, those tiers give you some added benefits, things like early access to shows, bonus material, Q&As. To all the people who are doing that, as always, thank you very much for the support. I really appreciate it. And if you're able to, that's really what helps to allow me to continue with this podcast and bringing on these guests. If you're not able to do that, as always, doing some of the small things to help with the algorithms. So if you're viewing this on YouTube or Rumble, hitting the subscribe button, turning on the notification bell, liking the video, all of those things really help to drive the algorithms. And then with the audio versions on on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leaving a starred rating and a short review. My upcoming guests, I have a woman coming on to speak more deeply about the Celtic traditions and kind of the Celtic worldview, mythology. She wrote a really beautiful book and also about plants and trees. And then after that, I'm still not sure. I'm actually leaving for a trip soon, so I'm trying to organize who will come on and the schedule and everything. But as always, I hope to bring on some really fascinating guests. So thank you all for tuning in. I hope this finds you all well, and I will see you all on the next episode.
Tunga